this lecture, I'm sure, is not to make you an anesthetist, but just to have some information about the anesthetic agents we use, because you definitely come across people who are going to have surgery or have had surgery, or you might find yourself in theater one day, you never know. So just arm yourself with a few things, okay? So my topic is general anesthesia. We're going to talk about inhalational anesthetic agents. I believe this morning you talked about intravenous anesthetic agents. So we are still in anesthesia, okay? So I'm hoping that this is the outline we'll follow. A brief history, where anesthesia has come from, where concern. Hello, am I standing at the right place? Hi. Hold it like this. Thank you. Properties of the ideal inhalational agent. Then we'll look at the basic concepts where inhalational agents are concerned. And then we'll look at the agents in current use, because there have been so many produced, but we don't need to know about all of them because we don't use them now. So we'll just talk briefly about the ones that are in current use. Okay. So I saw this picture and I thought it was interesting. I'm sure if you Google history of anesthesia, you may see something similar. So it was quite a novel thing when people started talking about anesthesia. If you've heard stories before in the past, if somebody needed to have a limb amputated or something, they will either just give the person a lot of alcohol, make them drunk stupor, and then the procedure will be performed, or you have the anesthetist, quote and unquote, actually knock the living daylights out of you. Yes, that's how crude it was. So it was until 1844 when a dentist, who happened to be at a demonstration for laughing gas, which was supposed to be for entertainment, but he noticed that one of the people who inhaled it struck his heel and didn't feel any pain. So it was like, there must be something in this gas. So that's when they started looking at nitrous oxide and its anesthetic properties. So he was a very nice guy. He volunteered to use the laughing gas the next day for a tooth extraction to see if it won't cause any pain. So after he made himself an experiment, he used himself an experiment, he could now tell other people that, you can use nitrous oxide for anesthesia. The patients will be fine, no pain. So that was the first anesthetic agent inhalational that was noticed in 1844. That was nitrous oxide. Then in 1846, diethyl ether was made public by William T. Morton, but they all had little problems. So you find that a variety of other agents were discovered over time, hundreds of them, but they all had issues and had to be discarded along the way. In 1847, chloroform was also advertised, and a lot of us, still talk about chloroform. When you talk to the patients, they're going to have anesthesia, they come out chloroform, you understand? Yes. Chloroform, yes, right. So, but it's very old, 1847. But the problem was that it was associated with cardiovascular depression and then severe liver necrosis. So over time, that was also discarded. Then cyclopropane, it was a good anesthetic. But the problem that was associated with it was its high flammability. As we started using more electronic gadgets, we realized that this could cause fires easily. So even though it had good properties, it had to be discarded. And then methoxyflurane, that was also used for a long time until it was discovered that a lot of it was metabolized and renally excreted and caused a lot of post-op renal failure. So over time, we saw a lot, but we kind of dropped them all as we went along the way. So the ones that are currently in use, which you are likely to come across, halothane, which was synthesized in 1951, but we started using it clinically in 1956. Then enflurane, that has been in clinical use since 1970. But I'll say that even though enflurane is known, these days we are staying away from enflurane a bit more. Okay, halothane in the developed world, people are also staying away from it. We'll find out as we go along. But in our parts of the world, we still use halothane, so you will come across it. And then isoflurane. Now, it's arguably the best anesthetic agent you can have, okay? So that has been in use since 1981. Then we have newer ones, desflurane and then sevoflurane. I must say that all of these were all discovered around the 1970s, but they had to do a lot of tests on them to be able to gradually release them onto the markets when they were reduced. So desflurane was the last one to be released onto the markets, but we don't have it in Ghana. What we have is halothane, isoflurane, and sevoflurane. Okay. So properties of ideal anesthetic agents. I hope you are not sleepy yet.
Not at all.
So if you are getting an ideal anesthetic agent, first of all, you must make sure that it's stable. It doesn't require a preservative. It has a long shelf life. And then it doesn't, it doesn't react. I think there should be no reaction to metal or rubber because they are components that could be part of the anesthetic machine. It should be stable with light and soda lines because you find that on our anesthetic machines, with the breathing circuits we use now, they all have soda line. It's a circle system that uses soda line to absorb carbon dioxide. So you have to ensure that it doesn't react to soda line. And then flammability. It should be non-flammable. We don't want fires in the theater. Okay, that could be really problematic because we use oxygen which will support combustion. So if it was flammable, we'll be in trouble. Then it should have a low solubility in blood so that it will have a rapid onset and rapid recovery. We want the inhalation agent to be in its gaseous form as much as possible. If it dissolves in blood, its arterial partial pressure in the alveolar won't equate that in the brain where its effect is going to take place. We don't want it to be too soluble in blood, and that's when you have more metabolism and you have more effects. So ideally, low solubility in blood, it should have a rapid onset and rapid recovery as a result of that. And you should be able to rapidly adjust anesthetic depth. And it should be potent. It should allow high concentration in oxygen. You should be able to use that anesthetic agent solely. If you have to use something else, then it's not potent enough. Okay? And it should be non-irritant to the airway so that you can induce anesthesia. When we are giving general anesthesia, we induce anesthesia, we maintain anesthesia, and the patient recovers from anesthesia. Okay, so it should be good enough for us to induce with. And there should be minimal side effects. We don't want any CNS excitation, ideally no cardiorespiratory depression. And then there are so many drugs that we may use. We may use analgesics, muscle relaxants, antibiotics. So we want no adverse drug reaction. And as much as possible, we don't want organ-specific damage. Okay? And then additional benefits that would be good for an ideal inhalation agent. It should be minimally metabolized, and then it should be excreted by the lungs. So as much as possible, as you inhale it, exhale it without going through the system and getting metabolized. And it should be a good bronchodilator. It would be nice if it has anticonvulsant properties and antiemetic properties, and be able to give analgesia at the same time. But I have news for you. We don't have any agents like that. Sorry? We don't have any agents like that, okay? And like I said, a lot of agents have been worked on, hundreds of them. About 18 were released for clinical use. But in the end, we settled on the 5 that I mentioned earlier: halothane, isoflurane, enflurane, sevoflurane, desflurane. Those are the ones that are in clinical use. But you'll find that even with them, some of them, we are kind of inching away from them a little bit, okay? So this slide is just to introduce the basic concepts where inhalational anesthesia is concerned. It's inhalational, so the patient will breathe it in. I guess that stands to reason, okay? So you have inspired gas. I hope you can see from the back, it's not very clear. But you have your inspired gas mixture here, okay, which the patient will breathe in. And as you breathe in, it's supposed to go into the alveoli. And you want a high concentration in the alveoli. When what you have inspired goes into the alveoli, the capillaries that surround the alveoli, you have the gases diffuse into the capillaries, okay, through the arterial system, and then to the brain where you have its effect. But you must remember that the gases that have a high blood solubility, some of them will get metabolized. They will not all get to the brain. And some of them may have affinity for other tissues, like maybe fat, and so may end up going there, okay? And so when anesthesia is over, you expect that the concentration in the brain is high, so a lot of it will go into the venous blood, and it will go back the same way into the alveoli. Now, what has been in other tissues will also be diffused, and that is when the ones that are fat soluble become important, because after you cut off your gases, then the ones that are in fat will slowly now be, released into the blood and then into the alveoli. Okay, so that might delay recovery a bit. Okay, so you can see that MAC is here. We'll talk about MAC. Then blood gas partition coefficient is here. MAC is the minimum alveolar concentration. Okay, we'll define it in a minute. And the blood gas partition coefficient, remember I said that as much as possible, it should not dissolve in blood. We want it to be in its gaseous state as much as possible. So the higher the blood gas coefficient, the greater the solubility in blood. And so it means that your induction will be a bit slower. Okay? If at some point you don't understand, please raise up your hand. Okay. All right, so MAC. It's important to know about MAC because that is the standard by which we compare the different inhalational agents, okay? And it's a concentration at 1 atmosphere of the anesthetic vapor in the alveoli that is required to produce immobility in 50% of patients subjected to a surgical stimulus, usually an incision. Okay, if you are doing the test in animals, you say a noxious stimulus. It could be anything, clamping the tail or whatever. But in 50% of the population, you will not get any movement, okay, with the MAC. I must say that to get 95% of the population completely immobile, you have to increase the MAC to about 1.2. Okay, so the MAC will ensure immobility in 50% of the population. If you want immobility in 95% of the population, you need about 1.2 times the MAC. Okay. And it's a standard for determining the potency of volatile anesthetic agents. I mean, just think about it. If you need just a small concentration to achieve this effect, it means it's potent, okay, as opposed to having a high concentration. So that is how we can compare the different gases. So nitrous oxide, which was discovered many years ago, the MAC is 105%. So you need a lot of it to achieve this 50% immobility. Now, halothane, MAC is 0.75% compared to sevoflurane, 2%. So you can see that halothane will be relatively more potent in terms of using the MAC, okay? And then isoflurane is 1.16%, enflurane 1.68%, and desflurane 6%, okay? And these have been done. There are studies and experiments that have been done, and they are established as such. So if you see anything in the literature, they'll only vary slightly, but they will all be around the same figures. There are some things that will increase the MAC. If the patient is hypothermic or has hypernatremia or has chronic alcohol or opioid use. And in children, it's been found that generally the minimum alveolar concentration that is required is a bit higher. And a few things that will reduce the MAC. Acute alcohol use. In the past, if we're using alcohol to knock out people, if the person is already intoxicated, you just need a little bit of the inhalational agents and they'll be anesthetized. Okay, then hypothermia, elderly patients tend to require a lower MAC, and then anemia and pregnancy. Okay, so like we said, the clinical effects of the inhalational agents will be in the brain. Okay, at equilibrium, the partial pressure of the anesthetic agents in the brain will be directly related to the alveolar pressure. So if you just cast your mind back to the picture I showed before, so we want our saturated vapor pressure, the partial pressure in the alveoli, to be high, because that is what will equilibrate with the brain. Okay, so the alveolar concentration will depend on the inspired concentration of the anesthetic agent. If you give a high concentration of the anesthetic agent, the alveolar concentration will rise higher. Okay, so then you'll find that when we are using inhalational induction, that's if you are inducing anesthesia using inhalational agents, we'll start off with very high concentrations of the anesthetic agent. Okay, so if it's halothane, for instance, usually the MAC will be 0.75%, 1%. But if we are inducing, we'll go as high as 6% because we want to increase the concentration of the gas in the alveolus. okay? And then alveolar ventilation. The higher the minutes ventilation, the more you can take in gas, the more you can increase the concentration in the alveolus. Then the functional residual capacity. Functional residual capacity is just your expiratory reserve volume plus your residual volume. If you have a large functional residual capacity, you have a lot of gases there already. Oxygen, nitrogen, air, there already. So if you introduce inhalational agents, what is there already will dilute what you are given. So you'll find that in children, okay, they will tend to have a higher alveolar concentration because their FRC is small. The dilutional factor is not there, so they will tend to be induced faster than an adult. In fact, we don't do inhalational induction in adults. It's difficult and tedious, takes forever. We tend to do IV induction in adults, except when the person has some airway obstruction and we don't want to lose the airway. Okay. And then the other important thing is the drug uptake from the lung. So remember, you need a high concentration in the alveoli, and then that will diffuse into the capillaries surrounding the alveoli, which will go into the arteries and then to the brain, okay? So if the blood gas partition coefficient is high, so the blood gas partition coefficient reflects the solubility of gas. I mentioned that earlier. The higher the blood gas coefficient, the higher the solubility of blood, means a lot of the drug will get dissolved in the blood and you have a lot of it in the gaseous form. What we want is the gaseous form to get a high concentration in the alveoli, which will be transferred to the brain. So if it's dissolving in the blood too much, it means your induction rate will be slow. Okay? I hope you are with me, partner. Okay. Then the pulmonary blood flow, a reflection of your cardiac output. If you have a high cardiac output, means increased pulmonary flow, so it means you have more blood carrying away some of your inhalational agents, so you won't get the high concentration that you want in the alveoli. Okay, these are just a few pharmacokinetic principles. And then the difference between the alveolar and the venous partial pressure will be due to the tissue uptake of the inhalational agents. If tissue uptake depends only on the tissue blood flow, you find that the organs that have a high blood flow will tend to get a higher concentration. So the brain, for instance, okay, will tend to get a higher concentration, and the ones that have a lower blood flow, it will be slower. And then when they are being released, it will be a slower release as well, as in patients who have, for agents that have a high lipid solubility, that will tend to go into fat stores. Okay. Okay, I think I kind of alluded to this. Now, the potency of the volatile anesthetic agent is associated with its lipid solubility, and that is measured by its oil to gas partition coefficient. I must say that there are lots of theories surrounding the way inhalational anesthetic agents work, okay? But I think the most popular one is the fact that they need to be lipid soluble to be able to go through the cell membranes. Okay, they're supposed to be ligand-gated proteins that help with the transport, and then they have their effects through GABA receptors, NMDA receptors. But I think maybe you shouldn't worry about that too much, because these are all theories that are supposed to try and unravel the history around inhalational anesthetic agents. Okay, but the important thing to note is that the potency of the agent is associated with its oil gas partition coefficient. Okay, so these are a few things that you may want to keep in mind. Nitrous oxide, MAC is 105%. We went through this the first time, so you can see that it's not very potent. Halothane is more potent. Isoflurane, desflurane, some books will say 5.8, some will say 6. Then the blood gas partition coefficient. You find that halothane seems to have a high blood gas partition coefficient. So what does it mean? Exactly. So more of the halothane, more halothane will dissolve in the blood, hence your induction will be relatively slower. So your faster induction agents will be desflurane, sevoflurane, and even isoflurane is better. Okay, but then we'll find out that we don't use isoflurane for induction. Okay, and we don't use desflurane either for induction because of its other properties. Okay, and then look at the oil gas partition coefficient. You see that halothane is quite potent. You see, the mark is 0.74%. And look at the oil gas partition coefficient. Remember I mentioned that its potency is related to that. It's very high. Okay, and then halothane again seems to go into a lot of fat tissue. So the more fat the patient has, the more halothane will diffuse into those tissues. So a patient like that, emergence will be slower because those fat tissues are poorly perfused, and then the agent, after it's cut off, will just be diffusing slowly out. Okay, right. Okay, so having talked about the pharmacokinetics, we'll speak a little bit about the pharmacodynamics. And I must say that usually inhalational agents, we have said, you take it in through the respiratory route, it's inhaled, okay? And if it doesn't dissolve in blood, it will be inhaled and exhaled through the respiratory system. The ones that are dissolved may be distributed, okay? And then may be metabolized. And some of them will have metabolized that have to be renally excreted. But if it doesn't dissolve in blood, most of it will still be excreted through exhalation, okay? So the pharmacodynamics, the inhalational agents generally produce a decrease in tidal volume. You find that isoflurane, halothane, sevoflurane will cause bronchodilation. That is something we want, an ideal anesthetic agent, okay? And I must say that sometimes in the ICU, when we have a patient with status asthmaticus and we are caught in the middle and we don't know what to do, we've used everything, all the bronchodilators that we know, the inhaled bronchodilators we know, and we have used magnesium, ketamine. Sometimes we use an inhalational agent, okay, because of this bronchodilatory effect. Desflurane, however, is not associated with a change in bronchial tone, so there's no bronchodilation with desflurane. Then on the cardiovascular system, ideally we don't want any cardiovascular depression, but you'll find that they all cause a decrease in mean arterial pressure. And then halothane, I'll emphasize this because you'll find that there's halothane in most hospitals in Ghana. Halothane will sensitize the myocardium to catecholamines, which results in arrhythmias. So halothane is arrhythmogenic. So you'll find that if a patient has increased catecholamines, maybe has pheochromocytoma, or even if a surgeon is going to use adrenaline for infiltration, if you are using halothane, you need to put it off because it will predispose the patient to arrhythmias, okay? So a few things about the inhalational agents' effects on the cardiovascular system. They all will cause a depression in your cardiac output, except for desflurane, sevoflurane, and then xenon. I'll talk about this one. Is a futuristic inhalational agent. We haven't started using it, okay? But then a lot of people think there's a lot of promise with xenon, okay? But they all, so this is the mode in which they cause the depression in cardiac output. Systemic vascular resistance doesn't change, but it's decreased in all of them, okay? In nitrous oxide, it's just a bit increased. But you find that mean arterial pressure is reduced in all of them, okay? And then isoflurane, you have a bit of elevation of your heart rate, enflurane and desflurane as well, okay? So they have little differences in the way they act on your heart rate, your systemic vascular resistance, but at the end of the day, they all cause some depression of your cardiac output. Then CNS, they will all reduce your metabolic rate and oxygen consumption. But on the flip side, they tend to increase cerebral blood flow. And this is important when you have a patient who has a raised intracranial pressure because it will worsen it, okay? Except when you are using isoflurane and desflurane at 1 mark, then that effect of cerebral vasodilatation is less, and then you won't have an increase in your intracranial pressure once you maintain your carbon dioxide levels. Then the effects on the liver, all of them reduce the hepatic blood flow to a small degree. And then only a small percentage of them may be metabolized by the liver. But then note, halothane. You've seen halothane again. So you see why halothane is getting out of vogue in the developed world. Because 25% of halothane is metabolized by the liver. And then there's a major metabolite which is produced, which has a cell-mediated immune response resulting in hepatitis. It could be mild to fulminant. And I think this is important because if a patient has had surgery, has been exposed to anesthesia, 2 days to a few weeks, 3 to 4 weeks, and they appear with jaundice, you must, at the back of your mind, have halothane, okay? You must, of course, rule out other things first, okay? So if there's nothing else to point to, then you could think about halothane as a cause. So what do you do if you have a patient like that? Supportive treatment and pray that they don't go into frank hepatic failure. But I must say that it is rare. The National Halothane Study estimated the risk at 1 to 10,000 anesthetics. But in the developed world, since its use has reduced, they have even increased the number some more. It's about 1 to 35,000 anesthetics. So it's quite rare, but it does occur. Okay, I'll give you an example. In my department, we have anesthesia clerks, okay, or technicians who help us. There was this young lady who was introduced as a technician in the department. At that time, we were using a lot of halothane. She was in the theater for about a week, and she became jaundiced. She didn't have anesthesia. She was just helping out set up. She became really jaundiced. And so, of course, she was investigated, and we couldn't find anything causing it. So we thought this could be halothane hepatitis. So it is not that rare, okay? You should have it at the back of your mind. The good thing is that this lady was taken out of theater, she was given other duties, and she recovered. And she's fine. So we vowed not to take her back to theater. So it's rare, but it's not so rare. Okay. Please. And like I said, if the blood gas partition coefficient is not high, as in if it's not dissolved in the blood too much, you have too much metabolism, and so you won't produce a lot of metabolites. Okay, but we found that there's production of inorganic fluoride by some of the halogenated agents which cause direct nephrotoxicity. Methoxyfluorine, for instance, I mentioned it as one of the older agents. It was taken out of use because of the nephrotoxicity that was associated with it. Okay, so it's not being used now. Isoflurane is good, and it can be used for prolonged periods because there's no significant increase in serum fluoride levels. So isoflurane is safe where the effect on kidneys is concerned. Sevoflurane, it undergoes significant defluorination. That is the mechanism by which the fluoride is produced. But I must say that there is no evidence for clinically meaningful effects on renal function. So even though fluoride ions are produced, we haven't found it to cause any nephrotoxicity in humans for now. Okay, so sevoflurane is safe. So halothane and desflurane, however, do not undergo significant defluorination, so we don't have a problem with the nephrotoxicity. Okay, so just a little, is there any question up until now? That's if you are still with me. If you haven't fallen asleep yet. So it's the mark of a good anesthetist. Even when they are talking, you are sleeping. That was just a joke. Okay, so this is halothane. I believe most of you have seen the anesthesia machine, you've seen the vaporizer, and you'll find that the vaporizers are color-coded. Halothane tends to be red. Okay, and it's the first halogenated anesthetic introduced in the 1950s. It's a liquid. It comes in a bottle like this. So when you order for halothane, this is what it will come as. Okay, it is poured into this vaporizer, and that vaporizes it, and that is what we use. Okay, it's non-explosive, it's non-flammable. That is why it's good for us now. It's used for inhalational induction because it has a sweet, relatively sweet smell. It's non-irritant, causes bronchodilation, so it's excellent. Okay, and for our part of the world, it's relatively cheap. That is why it's still available. The problem with halothane is the erythmogenic potential and then the hepatotoxicity. Okay, but in spite of that, we still use it. Okay, it's just that you have to be careful in the patients you use it in. If the patient has an increased catecholamine for whatever reason, you have to be careful with halothane. And then you must be looking out for the hepatotoxicity. Okay, the things that will increase the incidence of your hepatotoxicity if the patient has had more than one exposure in a relatively short time. Okay, so that's something you must keep in mind. Then enflurane. Enflurane was synthesized in 1963. We started using it in 1972. It has a pungent ethereal odor. The problem with enflurane is that it's metabolized to fluorides and excreted by the kidney, which is not desirable, okay, because it has the potential to cause toxicity. The other problem with enflurane, I said enflurane was one of the gases that were still being used, okay, and because when I joined the Department of Anesthesia, I still saw the vaporizers around, but I never got the chance to use it because I think they were thinking of taking it out. The reason it does that, it causes CNS excitation and post-op convulsions in predisposed patients. Really, you don't want your patient convulsing after they've had surgery. So it doesn't matter how good it is, so that's why enflurane has been set aside as well. Then isoflurane, this is one that is widely used, and you are more likely to find it in your hospital, okay? It undergoes minimal metabolism, which is good. Most of it will be in the gaseous state. It's quite potent. It causes some tachycardia and vasodilatation, but that is not too much of a problem. It's just that there's a theoretical risk of it causing coronary vasodilatation and causing what we call coronary steal syndrome. Okay, the coronary steal syndrome has to do with the fact that normal coronary vessels will dilate, but the vessels that are problematic, that have some atherosclerosis, that are already perfusing ischemic portions of your heart, will not be dilated. They will rather be constricted. So the ischemic portion of the heart that you would have loved to perfuse is going to be deprived even more. But it's a theoretical risk because, as always, they haven't found any clinical correlation between those who have ischemic heart disease who have been on isoflurane and a worsening of the ischemia. So it's something that we'll keep at the back of our minds until maybe 50 years from now they tell us otherwise. So isoflurane is a great agent, but I said we can't use it for induction because it's pungent. Okay, if you are doing inhalational induction, it should be something that is sweet smelling. It should not be irritant to get a smooth induction. So really, the two drugs that we can use are halothane and sevoflurane. Yes, halothane and sevoflurane. We can't use isoflurane for induction, but it is good for maintenance. Okay, and like I said, in anesthesia, we can do IV induction, intravenous induction, or inhalational induction. You find that most for adults will do intravenous induction. It's in children that sometimes will do inhalational induction. Okay, but there's the option of doing intravenous induction as well in children. So really, if we are going to use isoflurane, we will induce the anesthesia with halothane or sevoflurane and quickly switch to the isoflurane when the patient is asleep. Okay, so you can't use it to initiate the anesthesia, but it can be used for maintenance. And then that's sevoflurane. See that they are all color-coded. Isoflurane is purple, enflurane is orange, halothane is red, sevoflurane is yellow. So it has a pleasant odor, and it's useful for induction of anesthesia in children. Has a low blood solubility, so that's how come we are able to induce so fast. You have a lot of the gas in the alveolar compartment, not dissolved in the blood, okay? It has a low arrhythmogenic risk, so we should be pushing for more sevoflurane for induction in our parts of the world, because halothane has a problem of the hepatic toxicity, okay? But the sevoflurane also has its own problems, okay? Even though it's not arrhythmogenic, has a fast recovery, the problem is that it produces serum fluorides, okay, which we know to be associated with nephrotoxicity. But the interesting thing about sevoflurane is that it's only in rats that the nephrotoxicity has been found to be true. It has not been found to be true in humans. It hasn't been reported. So for now, we are happy to use sevoflurane. There's no documented report of nephrotoxicity in humans. But then there's something else about sevoflurane. Remember we said, talking about ideal inhalational agent, it should not react with your carbon dioxide absorber. Unfortunately, sevoflurane has some reaction with the CO2 absorber to produce a compound called compound A that has been associated with renal damage in rats again, but not demonstrated in humans. So for now, we are sitting tight, okay? And when you read the literature, they usually will say that it's prolonged exposure to the sevoflurane that will produce the compound A. So for now, we are sitting tight. We use it just for inhalation, and then we maintain anesthesia with isoflurane. Then desflurane. It has the lowest blood solubility of the modern agents. And if you notice, I don't know if you were looking at the vaporizers, the desflurane vaporizer looks very different. Okay, because it needs to be kept at a certain pressure, and it has to be warmed as well. It boils at a very low temperature, so if you're not careful, in the room, it will just vaporize. Okay, so they need to keep it under control. They had to put it under pressure and regulate the temperature so that you have a constant gas flow as is needed for anesthesia. Okay, it has a fast recovery from anesthesia than the other agents. But the problem also with desflurane is that it has severe airway irritation. So once it causes airway irritation, you can't use it for inhalational induction, but it can be used for maintenance. The good thing about desflurane is that because the patients can recover quickly from it. If you are doing very prolonged surgeries, where recovery with the other agents may be prolonged, desflurane might be a good choice. The only problem, or should I say, the problem with desflurane is that the vaporizer requires more frequent servicing. So I don't think we'll have desflurane in our parts of the world in a very long time because it's expensive to maintain the vaporizer. Okay. And then I just threw in the slide of the nitrous oxide. Okay, it was the first inhalational agent that was discovered. The advantages: it has a rapid onset and a recovery. It has mild analgesic properties and has minimal cardiorespiratory effects. In fact, for a long time, we're using nitrous oxide and oxygen together with the other inhalational agents, okay? But we don't do that anymore because of its many disadvantages, nitrous oxide. So even though you said that it has mild analgesic properties and minimal cardiorespiratory effects, the analgesic properties can be taken care of by using intravenous analgesic agents, okay? And then the minimal cardiorespiratory effects, most of the patients will paralyze and ventilate anyway. The problem with nitrous oxide is that it diffuses easily to air-filled cavities. So if the patient has a small pneumothorax, it's going to make the pneumothorax bigger. If the patient has intestinal obstruction with some gas trapping, they're going to get more gas trapped in there, and middle ear problems as well, okay? And it's associated with significant post-op nausea and vomiting. Then recently, there are concerns about the toxicity. Prolonged administration is reported to be associated with dispersion of the bone marrow DNA synthesis, and that is worrying because it means you can have hematological problems. And then neurotoxicity has been implicated in patients of extremes of age, either very young or very old. And then the other thing, it inhibits vitamin B12, okay, which will lead to megaloblastic anemia and other problems, including degeneration of the spinal cord. So really, if you think about it, do we really want to go through all that just for a little analgesia? So you'll find that in most places now, we don't have nitrous oxide. It's more expensive also. So we just make do with oxygen and air. But I must say that if there was to be nitrous oxide, they would be stored in either cylinders or they'll be in the piped gas line. And usually you recognize it by the blue cylinder. It's royal blue, okay? And when you go to the theater next time, look at the piped gas line. You find that the part that has nitrous has a blue color code as well, okay, if you are using it. Then, so this is futuristic. Then there's a lot of work still being done on it, okay? But I think the good thing about it is that it has a very low blood gas partition coefficient. So you have extremely rapid onset and recovery from anesthesia. And it doesn't produce any green gas effect. Okay, we don't have any problem with the ozone layer. And it's non-irritant to the airway, so it favors a smooth induction. It's not metabolized in the liver or kidney. So it's tending towards an ideal anesthetic agent, isn't it? It has a potent intra-op analgesic effect. Okay, so then all these are pointing to a good thing, and it's non-flammable and won't cause ozone depletion. Now, the problem with this is that it's a rare atmospheric gas, so its production is extremely expensive. So it's still in the developmental stage, but people are still talking about this. Maybe in our children's time, that's what we'll be using. So I have briefly tried to introduce you, not to make you an anesthetist, but just introduce you to the inhalational anesthetic agents that are available and why we use them. Okay, thank you very much. If you have any questions, please. Sorry? Yes. Okay, so in fact, I have never used ether before. I only read about it. Okay. but we don't use ether anymore. Okay, even though it had a good way of preserving the respiration, the patients will maintain their respiration, but they will salivate a lot. Okay, and it still had its cardiovascular problems. Now the problem with ether is that it's explosive and supports combustion. And now with the use, if you're using ether, you go into the dark ages, you go back to tying your vessels. You won't use diathermy anymore. You understand? Because you can't use ether when you're using diathermy in the theater, for instance. So because of its explosive nature, we don't use ether anymore. That's why I didn't mention it. Yes, but it was used in the past. I mentioned that it discovered in 1840s. You were there. So in the yes. Oh, he was there. He was there. Yes, it was used in the past. And even when they were using the Schimmelbusch mask, they would use ether as well. Okay, right. I didn't include it because we don't use it now. Yes, but for historical, if you want a little more, yes, historical basis, you can read a little bit about ether. And in fact, all the compounds that were developed from that ether molecule, they added and subtracted, okay, to form the newer ones that we have. Thank you. Please, any more questions? I hope you didn't sleep throughout. Yes.
Not at all.
The frequency of use. Okay, so I mentioned that the hepatotoxicity is more likely when you have repeated use. Okay, so it varies. Okay, but most people will recommend that you use it a month or more after the first exposure. Okay, so the patient shouldn't be exposed to it today, then tomorrow has to go for another, maybe there's a burns patient, for instance, has change of dressing today, 2 days later has to go for change of dressing again, you're using halothane. Okay, so at least a month, the longer it is, the better. So it should be more than a month. Okay. Yes, please. Sorry? For which one? Actually, I didn't find anything in relation to the duration of its use. Okay, that's to do with the halothane hepatotoxicity. I didn't find anything, because in the past, we could use it for 2-3 hours, 4-5 hour operation, okay, and some patients will be fine, okay, but it looks like it's an immune-mediated thing, so some people just seem to be predisposed, like the clerk I told you about, for instance. She hadn't had anesthesia, she had just been working in the environment, and then she got the hepatitis. Yeah, so I haven't found anything with the duration per se. Yeah. Yes, please.
The period between induction and then what guys you know you should think about the
Okay, so that's what we are doing inhalational induction. Is that it? Okay, so there are things that we look out for. So if we are inducing a child, for instance, with halothane or sevoflurane, initially your child will probably be awake, maybe crying. As they breathe in, they start getting anesthesia. They'll go through the different phases of anesthesia. They'll get to a point where they will be immobile. You find that their pupils are central and they won't respond to stimulation. At that point, they're adequately anesthetized, adequately induced. Yes, induction. Talking about. So at that point, your patient is adequately anesthetized. Yes. So you will switch. That's if you are switching to isoflurane. Yes. Then you put off the halothane, and then now you put on your isoflurane. If you put on the isoflurane before your patient is deeply anesthetized, they can cough, they can go into bronchospasm, laryngospasm, and it's a nightmare because they can get hypoxic and bradycardic, and then can even arrest if it's very severe. Okay, so you need to make sure that they are deep enough when you switch. Okay. Please, are there any more questions? halothane. Okay, well, in the theaters, most of the time, okay, unless, most of the time, for most theaters, so when you go to your hospital, please check your theater, there is a scavenging system, okay, so what the patient expires goes through the scavenging system, and that is vented off in the atmosphere, okay, so really, the concentration in theater should be low, unless there are leaks in your breathing circuits. Now, the other time when you'll be exposed to the anesthetic agent is when we are using it in small children. And we are using a kind of circuit called Michelson F, the ISTPs. That is not attached to the scavenging system. So for that, you can get quite a bit. But you need a very high concentration to get any effect. And I must say that I haven't seen any documented effects per se of the inhalational agents. What I have come across is nitrous oxide, okay, and its effects. We talked about the bone marrow DNA suppression for nitrous oxide, and then its effects on megaloblastic anemia. But you need a very high concentration, not the very little that may be coming, you understand? So you need to set yourself to anesthesia for quite a bit to be able to get that effect. So I haven't come across any documented effects on the anesthetists and the surgeons. Believe you, if there's something, I'll find out. Yeah, anything, please. Yes, please.
I was very happy if you go over the table, the MA something, mark.
This one?
Yes.
Okay. You want me to go over? So I mentioned that the minimum alveolar concentration, it gives you an idea of how potent the agent is. So the smaller the mark, the smaller the alveolar concentration you need to produce anesthetic effects, the more potent it is. Okay? So nitrous oxide is 105%, which is a lot. Halothane is 0.74%. That's if you are using just your mark as your determinant, okay? And then ISO is 1.15%. But I said the mark is what you need to produce immobility in 50% of the population. If you want to produce immobility in a lot more people, in about 95% of the population, you have to increase it a bit to about 1.2, 1.3% of the mark, okay? And then the blood gas coefficient, it gives you an idea of how much of, how soluble the gas is in blood. So find that of all the agents here, halothane is the most soluble, about 2.4%. So if it's more soluble in blood, it means you won't have a lot of it staying in the gaseous form, which will stay in the alveoli for you to increase your alveolar tension where the gas is concerned, and that will relate to what you get in the brain. Please, do you understand? So that is it. So then you find that the ones that have a smaller blood gas coefficient will induce anesthesia faster. Okay, so sevoflurane, so if you compare sevoflurane to halothane, sevoflurane will induce anesthesia faster. Theoretically, desflurane and isoflurane should also do the same, but the problem is that desflurane and isoflurane are irritants, so you won't even get there. The patient will start having respiratory problems. And then the oil gas partition coefficient also has something to do with the potency. Okay, so you find that halothane's mark is 0.74%. You find that the oil gas partition coefficient is very high. Okay, so the higher the oil gas partition coefficient, the higher its potency, the more likely it will produce its effect. Okay, then the fat blood coefficient has to do with the affinity of the inhalational agent for fat. Okay, so you find that halothane again tends to go into fatty tissue. So I mentioned that in obese patients, even though fat is poorly perfused, you find that some of the halothane will diffuse into fatty tissue. So at emergence, especially for obese patients, these the halothane from the fatty tissues will slowly now, diffuse from the fat tissues and will your recovery from the anesthesia. You understand? Because if there's no, it doesn't deposit in fat tissues. As soon as you put your inhalation agents of what is in the highly perfused organs will quickly just, be brought, will diffuse into the blood and into the alveoli to be expired. But if it's in the fatty tissues, it will be a slower process, so that you find that your emergence may be a little slower. Yes, please. Oh, I mean, these days, I must say that these days we use isoflurane more than we use isoflurane more. The only time we are forced to use halothane in our setting is that sometimes, occasionally we get sevoflurane, but most of the time we don't. When we need to do inhalation induction, that's when we will use halothane. So in an obese patient, we will use isoflurane. Okay, in most adult cases, it's isoflurane we use now. Yes, that is it. That is it. So that's the problem. So that's why we don't even have sevoflurane on the market, and we are still sticking with halothane. But isoflurane is better. And in Kolebu, we make sure we have isoflurane all the time. So we use isoflurane a lot. Okay, we have the halothane there just for inhalation induction. Yeah. In children, yes, inhalation induction, usually in children. You do inhalation induction in adults only when you have airway obstruction, upper airway obstruction, and you are worried that you will lose the airway. Because if you give IV induction, they fall unconscious very quickly and you lose your airway. But with inhalation induction, the patient kind of maintains their airway. So it will take a very long time, but that's the only time we use inhalation induction in an adult. Okay? Usually it's in children. Okay, thank you. There are no more questions.